Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for a Monday morning quarterback edition, so let's get right into it. The Rams had the week off, so they remain 2-3. And with Arizona's loss, a surprising loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, given the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers lost their quarterback, Michael Vick. They're down to their third string. It was a little bit surprising that they lost, but now that the Cardinals are 4-2, the Rams and the Seahawks are 2-3, that division is wide open. But let's get right into the scores that actually did play. The Falcons and the Saints kind of a Midwestern team, they won 31-21 over their division rival. But it was really kind of an interesting game because the Falcons didn't play all that bad. You look at their stats, Matt Ryan had 295 yards, 2 touchdowns. Darnell Freeman had 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. Julio Jones had 6 receptions for 93 yards. Now, when you just look at those, you figure, oh, well, they might have won. Well, they played well enough to get 21 points, but for whatever reason, just anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and you don't see it necessarily in the stats. But there were a lot of drop balls that were on important plays that could have helped Atlanta really take a hold of that game. It was kind of that New Orleans voodoo going on down in the Superdome. Drew Brees had a 312-yard passing day with a touchdown. Mark Ingram had 20 carries, only 46 yards. I'm not really sure what's going on with the rushing game there, if it's an offensive line problem or if Mark Ingram just isn't the answer. But the rushing game is really not that good at all. But 2 touchdowns for Mark Ingram, that'll kind of pick up for it. Bernard Watson with 127 receiving yards and a touchdown. So the Atlanta Falcons lose their first game of the season. New Orleans is now 2-4. That division still kind of belonging towards Atlanta. It's going to come down between Atlanta or the Carolina Panthers, who also lost yesterday. But right now, it's looking like it's going to be an interesting division. I mean, New Orleans still has a story to tell within that division. That was back on Thursday. Looking at some of the other games, the Vikings beat the Chiefs 16-10. Again, the Chiefs continue a free fall, which is just kind of shocking. Again, we said it last week. The Chiefs were expected to win this division if the, at the very least, contend with the Denver Broncos, given the fact that they came so close to contending with the Denver Broncos last year. They were expected to take that next step, and for whatever reason, things have just not gone their way at all. Alex Smith, again, not a bad day, 282 yards and a touchdown. West was their leading rusher. He only had 33 yards and a fumble. That's not going to do it too well. People can sit there and say, well, he deserves to be out of the game, this and that. I'm not going to get into that. I've done videos on him in the past. But I am kind of surprised that the Chiefs have not at least brought in Ray Rice for a workout, given the fact that obviously they don't have any kind of rushing attack without Jamal Charles. Their tight end, Kelce, I believe that's how you say it. Sorry if I'm wrong. 88 yards, no touchdowns, but the Chiefs are 1-5. They're pretty much all but done in that division race. I mean, making the playoffs, they'd pretty much have to win out here, maybe lose a couple games left, and that's going to be difficult. Teddy Bridgewater for the Vikings went for 249 yards, a touchdown, but 2 picks. I mean, he gave the Chiefs some opportunities. They just couldn't turn it into offensive yards. Adrian Peterson, only 60 rushing yards, not very good for his standards. And Sean Diggs with 129 receiving yards. But the Minnesota Vikings just kind of chipped away at it. They obviously weren't all that great themselves. 16 points, only 1 touchdown on the day. The rest field goals, but they got a field goal first quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. They just kind of did it all throughout the game. The Chiefs scored all 10 of their points in the fourth quarter. You can't wait that long and expect things to go well. So Minnesota is now 3-2. The Chiefs, as I said, 5-1. The Steelers and the Cardinals, we talked about that already, even though they're not really Midwestern teams. We'll go ahead and throw the Bengals in there. They won 34-21 over the Buffalo Bills. Andy Dalton had 243 yards and 3 touchdowns. Fairly impressive there. Not necessarily the yardage. E.J. Manuel had 263, a touchdown and a pick. Nothing really else of note there. Cincinnati, though, is still undefeated. They're still kind of that team that you don't really want to trust, but they just find ways to win. They're doing a good job defensively overall. I mean, they got a shutout in the third quarter, a touchdown in each other quarter. The Buffalo Bills are 3-3, Cincinnati 6-0 now. But the Bengals are just doing just enough to win, and they're still more impressive than the Denver Broncos, who we'll get here in a second. But still, they're an interesting team. They're kind of one of those teams that you're going to want to pick come playoff time, depending on how the second half of the season goes, obviously. But you just quite can't force yourself to. The Chicago Bears and Detroit Lions in an NFC North matchup. The Chicago Bears lose in overtime, 37-34. Jay Cutler had a pretty decent day, kept the picks down, only 1 interception. Matthew Stafford also had 1 interception for the Lions. Jay Cutler had 353 passing yards and a touchdown, countered by Stafford's 405 yards, 4 touchdowns. So he had a huge day. Obviously, he was upset at the insinuation that Orlovsky might be replacing him as the starting quarterback, or he might be replaced after this year. I still contend that Matthew Stafford is a good enough quarterback to take the Lions where they want to go, but they gutted their defense. They no longer have Nick Fairley. They no longer have Ndamukong Suh. They lost some pieces in the secondary. That's a big reason why they're not doing too well this year, and they want to throw it all on Matthew Stafford. Yes, Matthew Stafford isn't quite the number 1 pick that they hoped he would be, but he's still a pretty good quarterback. Matt Forte had 69 yards and a touchdown, countered by Abdullah's 48 yards. The Bears fall to 2-4. Detroit gets their first win of the year. Of course, it would come at Chicago's expense. The Bears, they're just kind of an odd team. They did a great job, of coming back. They had to score 18 points in the fourth quarter, but they just couldn't get it done. I mean, both teams had a couple possessions in overtime and just couldn't get it done. And these two teams are really kind of floundering right now. Obviously, Detroit, some people were wondering if they would go winless. I obviously didn't think that would happen. I was hoping that they wouldn't beat the Bears, since they're my number 2 team behind the Rams. And one other thing I'll touch on quickly with this game was there was a catch made by Golden Tate that was called for a touchdown. The thing that upsets me about the catch, and even if you take away the fact that I am a Bears fan, it should not have been a catch based on the way that they've called similar things in the past. He caught the ball, it barely crossed the goal line, and almost immediately comes out of his hands. Well, there was that play with Calvin Johnson a couple seasons ago where he had the ball, took a few steps, all of a sudden falls down to the ground, leaves the ball on the ground, and that's not a touchdown. Well, that's ridiculous. They need to find some sort of consistency within these type of calls. There are inconsistent calls, but they've called so many non-touchdowns now. To call this one a touchdown was ridiculous. But to flip that over, it was a catch. Just from the eye test, you can tell that it was a catch. Any sane fan, even if they love the Chicago Bears, would tell you that that was probably a catch. But you have to call all those other ones a catch too, because from the eye test, you can tell they were catches. I don't care if you're talking about the guy from the Cowboys a season ago or 2 seasons ago. I don't care if you're talking about Calvin Johnson from a couple seasons ago, or if you're talking about the one yesterday. They were catches. The fact that we even have to argue about this is kind of ridiculous. Broncos beat the Browns 26-23. Again, Peyton Manning just is not looking good at all. The offensive line is a big reason for that. Everybody wants to heap it on Peyton Manning, and no, he's not Peyton Manning anymore. at least not the one that we've grown accustomed to. But he can still throw a decent ball, but he's got people up in his face all the time. Now, that's not to say that the offensive line is solely responsible for all the interceptions. Peyton Manning has got way more interceptions right now than touchdowns. He threw for a touchdown and 3 interceptions with 290 yards yesterday. That is just not good, regardless of how you slice it. Hillman, though, had 111 rushing yards. They need to kind of rely more on that rushing game, as well as the defense. Another pick 6 for KU's own Aqib Talib. The KU secondary doing a good job out there in Denver. McNown had 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And that was about all for Cleveland. Cleveland falls to 2-4. Denver's still undefeated. They're getting the job done. You can say that. They're not looking great doing it, but if you have a 0 over there in the loss column, you can't complain. 3 points in the first quarter, 7 in the second, 3 in the third, 10 in the fourth, and then the game-winning field goal in overtime as the Broncos remain undefeated. Texans beat the Jaguars 31-20. Brian Hoyer getting the start for the Texans as the defense starting to pick it up a little bit over there for the Texans. But again, J.J. Watt can't do it himself. Hoyer 293 for 3 touchdowns. Arian Foster 53 yards. Houston is now 2-4. Jacksonville 1-5. Looking at some of the other games, the Packers beat the Chargers 27-20 in a game that was a lot closer than many expected. A lot of people, I think, thought Aaron Rodgers was going to have a field day with this. He didn't do too bad, 255 for 2 touchdowns, countered by Phillip Rivers, 503 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is a big score for me because I have him on my fantasy team. Would like to have seen a couple more touchdowns, but I'll take the yardages as well. James Starks, 112 yards and a touchdown for the Packers. Not too bad there. Green Bay still undefeated. They're pretty much going to win the NFC North. There's going to be no challenge. There's no way they're going to lose enough games to fall back towards the Vikings. Detroit is pretty much out of it. Chicago is pretty much out of it. So it's pretty much the Packers division to win. 14 points right away in the first quarter. The San Diego defense settled down after that. They slowed down Aaron Rodgers enough to give themselves a chance. But unfortunately for them, they just couldn't find the end zone enough. The final Midwestern game, though, was the Colts against the Patriots. This game was slightly irritating just for the fact of there was a lot of people in the national media that sat there and picked apart the Patriots when Deflategate first came around. They called them cheaters. They said that they've done enough in the past to believe that this story is true. All of a sudden, when there wasn't hardcore empirical evidence against the Patriots, now they're turning around and they're saying, well, this is all the Colts' fault for even bringing this up. So they were saying, oh, well, this is going to be a blowout, and I hope we see a 60-0 game. Really? I mean, come on. The Colts are a little bit better than that. I expected it to be a bigger difference than it was, but I'm glad that the Colts kept it close and possibly could have won it if they had done just a little bit more. Andrew Luck had 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, finally starting to see the Andrew Luck that we were accustomed to seeing the last couple years as opposed to the one that we've seen this year. Tom Brady, he was Tom Brady, 312 yards of his own, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Obviously, that 1 extra touchdown was the difference. Winning by 7. LeGarrette Blount, 93 yards and a touchdown. Frank Gore, 78 yards. T.Y. Hilton, 74 yards and a touchdown. Amendola, the leading receiver for the Pats, 105 yards. New England still undefeated, 5-0. Indy falls to 3-3. And again, it was good to see Andrew Luck play so well. Because that's what Indianapolis needed. They would have loved to have beaten the Patriots, not because of any of this Deflategate nonsense. I mean, quite frankly, maybe if the Patriots had something to do, the Colts didn't care. The Colts players made a couple offhanded comments, and then the league looked into it, and then all of a sudden things got done, things went forward, and things went into investigation mode, into Deflategate. I don't think it was necessarily the Colts players sitting there whining like, oh, they were playing with bad balls and I didn't like it. They were cheating. No, the Colts knew that they got their butts kicked, and they just happened to mention and say, hey, the balls felt a little squishy there, and something might have been up. And then went from there. To blame the Indianapolis Colts for that is fairly ridiculous. And again, it's good to see Andrew Luck looking more like Andrew Luck. going forward, that can bode nothing but good things for the Colts. But they've got to start turning things around. They're still not necessarily in a good position to even win their division, let alone make the playoffs. So they've got to get the good vibes rolling. Excuse me, as I've got kind of marble mouth here today. But ultimately, I think that they can do it. Their division isn't all that difficult, so that bodes well for them as well. But the Patriots, unfortunately, for everybody else in the league, looking like the Patriots. What are you going to do? That is the view from the Midwest. What are your views on today's topic? What did you think of all the games yesterday? Obviously, with the Rams having an off week, a bit of a lull for things here in the St. Louis area, but a lot of good games around the NFL. Monday Night Football, a couple Eastern teams today. I will be watching because I'm a Star Wars fan, and the Star Wars trailer is going to drop, but I could do a whole video on that. Maybe I will. We'll see. Until the next time, though, I'll see you then.
I remember